Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Scoring from the 50 podcast. I know it's been a while. I got kind of busy last year, and it kind of just faded to the back of my priorities. But hopefully, this year we'll be back full time. Hopefully, we'll be doing one episode a week, trying to get on a better schedule. Maybe every Monday, every Tuesday. We'll see about that. But we are officially back on YouTube, back on Apple Podcast, on the Scoring from the 50 podcast. Today is August 20th. 2024. It's the first day of school for my high school. So while everyone else is at school, I got my last hour off, 7th hour, don't have a class. I'm home early doing a podcast. Let's talk about some college football. Who's ready for this season? Starting this weekend, we got week 0. Only really game that we're paying attention to is Georgia Tech versus Florida State in Ireland. That's going to be a really good game. Looking forward to see DJU in his first game. Speaking of Florida State, that is going to be our first team we talk about. Today, we're going to be previewing the 2024 season. I have a few predictions, doing a little bit different this year. We're going to be talking about best case, worst case for every team that I think could have a decent year, might have an interesting year. But first, we're going to be talking about the ACC, then the Big 12, then the Big 10, and the SEC at the end. Starting off with the ACC, Florida State plus 270 to win the conference. How good is DJU? Feels like he's gotten better every year, but hasn't quite hit that 5-star ceiling he had out of high school. A lot of Florida States will rely on him. I think that they're going to have a pretty good season, right? I think best case scenario, they go 12-0, win every single game. DJU plays unbelievable. Finally plays like that 5-star he could have been at Clemson, and then transferred to Oregon State. Wasn't quite as good, didn't have as good as a team, but he could be very good this year with Florida State. I think they could go 12-0. Worst case, they go 8-4. Tough year. Not everything's clicking. DJU kind of plays like he did his freshman year at Clemson. I think maybe the wide receivers aren't as good. They can't replace as much as they did last year. The defense can't replace. My prediction for them, they're going to go 11-1. I think they have a pretty good shot at winning the ACC, pretty good shot at making the playoff, but just relying on a few key things to make up for what they lost last year to see how good they are. Their key games, they're going to have to play Clemson, Miami, Notre Dame, and Florida. So a couple big games there. The Miami game is going to be huge. Clemson, I think that's going to be a really good game. Florida, that's going to be huge, especially for Florida. They're going to need to win that game if Billy Napier wants to keep his job. Going to be a huge game. Moving on to Clemson, the second biggest favorite to win the ACC. How good is Cade Klubnik? He's kind of in the same boat as DJU. He's had that 5-star potential. Could have been really good, but hasn't quite gotten there. Could he take a huge step in year 2 under Garrett Riley? Will he hit that potential out of high school? Can he continue the footsteps of Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson? He hasn't so far, but he had that potential to do it. I think he can, but we'll see this year. How good is their wide receiver? Their wide receivers have not been good the past couple of years. They need to get more separation than they did the past few years. Do they have the dudes to do that? Antonio Wilson, Brian Westco, I think those are going to be the key guys to answer your questions. Best case scenario, I think Clemson goes 11-1. I don't think there's any way they go undefeated. They're just not that talented. I think using the transfer portal, well, I guess not using the transfer portal, it will be Dabo Swinney's huge flaw. I think worst case, it's a huge flaw, and they go 7-5. They just complete failure of a season. My prediction for them, I think they go 9-3, win a couple big games, lose a couple big games, and they go from there. Their key games, they have Georgia to open the year week 1. They have Florida State, Louisville, Virginia Tech, and South Carolina. Look out for that Virginia Tech game. It's at Virginia Tech in November. We'll talk about that game whenever we get to Virginia Tech, but look out for that. Miami, the third biggest favorite to win the ACC. Cam Ward has the potential to bring Miami back. Damian Martinez in the run game, stellar defense. This is going to be the best Miami team we've seen in a long time. The U might be back. I've been watching a couple months ago. I watched the U Part 1, the 30 for 30, and then just a couple days ago I watched Part 2. Found that they came up and won arguably the best team ever in 2002, and then talked about their eventual fall off with sanctions, different stuff like that. But really interesting documentary if you guys want to go see that. I fully recommend it. But the U might be back. They were really good back in the day. I don't know that. That was way before I was born, 1990s, early 90s, late 80s. They were the team of the 80s. That is a super interesting documentary. Super cool to learn about that. Learn about the different coaches, Jimmy Johnson and all that. They could be back. Best case scenario, they go 12-0. Cam Ward is a absolutely insane. Plays to his best potential. Damian Martinez in the run game goes insane. I think they could win every game. Worst case scenario, I think they go 8-4. But that's still an improvement for Mario Cristobal from last year. I think if the worst case scenario is an improvement, I think you're in a pretty good spot. My prediction for them, I think they go 12-0. I think they're in the ACC championship. I seriously think this might be the best team in the ACC. They have the most talent. It's just a question, the coaching, if they decide to take a knee, hopefully they decide to do that and they can win a few more games than they did last year. Now, my favorite team in the ACC, a team that I will always root for to be good, Virginia Tech, plus 1,400 to win the ACC. Brent Pry has built to this year, and they've got a very favorable schedule. Do you remember when Virginia Tech was good? I don't. Just like Miami, I wasn't born. Virginia Tech is that urban legend in my brain. Enter Sandman, Michael Vick, Lane Stadium. It's like this great empire that didn't last very long, but it's fallen. I want to see a 0-1 loss Virginia Tech host a 1-2 loss Clemson in early November more than anything else this season. Kyron Drones is going to be such a good quarterback. I think he can beat you in the air. He can beat you on the ground. They have a really good run game, really good defense. I think best case scenario, Virginia Tech is the same as Clemson, 11-1. Also, same as Clemson, better than Clemson actually. Worst case scenario is 9-3. They have that favorable of a schedule. I think they go 10-2. Their big games are against Clemson and Miami. That's really the only two big games. That game against Clemson, early November. Say Virginia Tech's, I don't know, they have one loss. They're undefeated. We're going to hear Enter Sandman at night, blaring through those speakers. The crowd going crazy. The first time I will ever really experience that. I cannot wait. That is, if I could have one thing happen this season, that would be it. Championship prediction for the ACC. I think it's Florida State versus Miami. The battle for Florida. What a game that would be. People didn't want this game whenever Miami joined the ACC. I think Miami does squeak it out in the scenario over Florida State. DJU versus Cam would go crazy. At the addition of Damian Martinez, I think that gives them the slight edge over Florida State in Charlotte. I think the ACC is going to be a really interesting conference this year. I think it's only a 4-team race, personally. I don't think that there's going to be more than that. There's a couple good teams. You got Louisville, you got Wake Forest, you got a couple good teams that could challenge those top four, but I think these four are really your best bets. Now, moving on to the Big 12. Who could win this? You got K-State, Utah, Kansas. Those are the favorites. Starting at K-State, plus 350. Tied with Utah for the favorite. Avery Johnson, Dylan Edwards, they're going to outrun most teams they play. Their defense, always good. They could be looking at a playoff berth by the end of the year. Avery Johnson could end up in New York. Best case, they go 12-0, win every single game. They're in the Big 12. Worst case, they go 7-5. Things don't really click, but my prediction, they go 11-1. They're going pretty far. I fully believe in K-State. I fully believe in Avery Johnson and Dylan Edwards, both from Kansas. Their key games are against Oklahoma State, Kansas, Iowa State. So, they're not playing a super tough SEC Big Ten schedule. They are in the Big 12, so temper your expectations in the playoff if they were to make it. But I think they could win the Big 12. Utah, also plus 350. Cam Rising is back for the 100th time. Can he stay healthy? How good is their run game? Utah won the past two conferences that Cam Rising has stayed healthy. This team has the best home field advantage in the conference. The best team in the conference. Can they live up to it? Best case, they also go 12-0. Worst case, I think 8-4, making a pretty good bowl game. My prediction, they also go 12-0. So my prediction, you got K-State, Utah in the Big 12 championship. K-State 11-1. Prediction for Utah 12-0. Kansas, the big rival to K-State this year. This team solely relies on Jalen Daniels. I'm sorry to say it, but they do. The biggest loss in the offseason for them was Andy Kotelnicki. Will Jalen Daniels stay healthy, and how will he and Jeff Grimes mesh? Best case scenario, I think they can go 12-0. I don't think they will. Worst case, I think they go 8-4. My prediction is going to be 11-1. I think K-State edges out Kansas in their head-to-head matchup, so I think K-State gets that conference championship berth. But Kansas is also a really good team fighting for a playoff spot. Arizona, plus 750. Very sneaky team here. Tet McMillan and Nova Fifita might be the best wide receiver / quarterback combo in the country, let alone the conference. Brent Brennan is a damn good new head coach. The Wildcats could be a college football playoff sleeper. Best case is 10-2. Worst case is 7-5. They got a big gap there, as most teams do in the Big 12. Their key games will be against Central Florida and K-State. I think that K-State game, it won't count as a conference game. I keep forgetting about that. I'm sure you do too, but due to it being scheduled before the whole conference realignment stuff, that will not be a conference game. Iowa State is at plus 1,000. Matt Campbell is built towards this year since 2021. He's got a veteran-laden team that can win the Big 12. Lots of guys coming back. Rocco Becht is always going to be really good. Best case, they go 11-1. Worst case, they go 7-5. A lot of these Big 12 teams, you don't know exactly how good they are. They could be really good. They could be really bad. I think Iowa State's going to be pretty good. Going to be 10-2. 10-win season's never bad. Their key games are against Utah, K-State, and KU, so they got to play the top 3 teams in odds to win the Big 12. So, pretty tough schedule for Iowa State, but hopefully they can have a pretty good season under Matt Campbell. Oklahoma State, they're plus 1,200. Maybe not the most talented team, but one of the oldest. When was the last time Mike Gundy had an old team? They won the Big 12 in 2021. Alan Bowman's pretty good, serviceable, but Ollie Gordon is the best running back in the country. The Pokes could do something really, really good in 2024. Best case, go 10-2. Worst case, they go 7-5. As you've heard with all the other Big 12 schools, very big gap there between if they can be really good or really bad. Prediction, I think they go 9-3. Their key games will be against Utah, K-State, and Colorado. Man, Colorado, they're an interesting team. Not going to talk about them today, but they could be really good or really bad. They got the talent on the outside. Do they have the talent on the inside in the trenches? The championship, again, like I said, K-State versus Utah. Two hard-nosed, gritty teams that will never go down without a fight. I think K-State wins the game on back of Dylan Edwards and Avery Johnson and out-physical the most physical team in the Big 12. I think K-State's got it this year. They didn't win it last year, kind of took a step back, but I think they win their second championship in 3 years. Go to the playoff, get that bye. Huge year in Manhattan. In the Big 10, the favorite is Ohio State at plus 160. As you guys, I'm sure you know, I'm a Michigan fan, but I try to take my bias out whenever I talk about this stuff. Ohio State is probably the best roster in the country. I think we can all agree that addition of Quinshon Judkins, Caleb Downs, I think those are huge additions to their offense and defense, respectively. They're going to be really good. I think the only reason why Georgia is ranked ahead in most polls is because of the coaching. Kirby Smart, he's won games. He's won big games. Ohio State, Ryan Day, they haven't won big games. Trying my hardest to take my fandom out of this, I will say Ohio State has the team to go 16-0. They could win the national championship, go undefeated, win every single game they play. But how good would that O-line be? That's been their big issue the past couple years. Just being good, not great on the O-line, in the trenches. They have to be great. How good will Will Howard be? He got beat out by a K-State quarterback. He did. I know everyone's praising him and praising the rest of the team, but their quarterback, whenever it comes down to it, will Will Howard be able to win them a game? Can they beat Michigan? Can they beat them? How many years in a row are we going to have this conversation about Ryan Day? He's 1-3 against them. He lost to an interim head coach last year. Can he get over that hump? Should he be on the hot seat? If they lose that game, should he be on the hot seat? That's not a question for me to answer. As you know, I'm a Michigan fan. I'm not going to answer that question. I'll leave it up to you guys. Should Ryan Day be on the hot seat if he loses to Michigan? Their key games will be at Oregon, at Penn State, and versus Michigan, at home in the shoe to end the season. Man, that game against Oregon, that's going to be the biggest college football Saturday of my life. You got so many games. November 12th. Do not make plans for November 12th. Moving on to Oregon at plus 210, another team that could hypothetically go 16-0. Oregon is easily a top 5 team in the country, but Dan Lanning just hasn't won that big game yet. Kind of like Ryan Day, he just hasn't won the big game. I believe in Dan Lanning this year. I think he can take the next step. I think he will win a couple big games. There's with conference realignment, there's more big games per year, but I think he's going to win at least a couple this year. How good are they in the trenches? They've been good. A lot of people thought that they would out-physical Washington last year. Twice, they couldn't. Even whenever they were favored by 9 was it in the Pac-12 championship? They still got out physical by Washington. They need to be better there. How good can Dylan Gabriel be? To transfer, another one who got beat out by someone younger than him and then transferred, but now everyone's saying he's really good. I think Dylan Gabriel is really good. I think he could be very, very good for the Oregon Ducks. Will he win them a game whenever he needs to? Their key games will be at home versus Ohio State, at Michigan, and at home versus Washington. That Michigan game scares me. I'm not sure we're going to be able to keep up with them, but we will see. Again, that game versus Ohio State. Wow. That November 12th. Do not make plans. Penn State, plus 450. One of the two teams I think could threaten the top two. Oregon, Ohio State. I think those are the consensus. They're going to be in the championship. I think there's two teams. I think Penn State and the next team we'll talk about could challenge them, but we will see. Penn State's 2022 class included the likes of Drew Allard, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, and Caden Saunders. This class was supposed to be the one that pushed them over the top. They haven't done that yet. They need to win the big one. So does James Franklin, because he hasn't won one in a long time. Especially with the schedule they have, they should be a lot better. Best case scenario, they go 12-0. They got a really talented team. I think they could win every game they play. Worst case, things don't work out. Drew Allard regresses somehow. Katron Allen, Nick Singleton, the run game isn't that good. They go 8-4. Personally, I think they're going to go 11-1. They got big games home against Ohio State, so should give them a little bit of a boost. They go to Wisconsin, and they play at USC in the Coliseum. Very interesting. Penn State is a team that could be really good or really bad. The second team I think could challenge Oregon and Ohio State is Michigan. The defense will be one of the best in the country. They bring back Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Will Johnson. They're bringing a lot of that defense back that won a national championship last year. They should be the best in the country. The schedule is so difficult, though. They play 3 of the top 4 teams. They have question marks all over the offense. Running back, look, I know we all know Donovan Edwards is going to be running back number 1. Khalil Mullings is looking like he's going to be number 2. How good can he be? Can he be what Donovan Edwards has been the past couple of years? Who's the quarterback? Who is their quarterback? They haven't named a starter as of recording this. Alex Orji seems to be the favorite. I think he's the only one on roster that can win us a national championship. He's the only one that could win a Big Ten championship. I think Davis Warren. I think Jack Tuttle. I think they're really good. I think they have lower floors than Alex Orji, but I think Alex Orji is the only one who has the potential to win a national championship back-to-back for Michigan. Wide receiver, they lost Cornelius Johnson, lost Roman Wilson. Someone's got to replace him there. Best case scenario, I think they could go 12-0. I think if Alex Orji plays to his best case that he possibly can, they go 12-0. Worst case, they go 7-5. They play a couple really big games against USC, Texas, Oregon, Ohio State. Again, those are 3 of the top 4 teams in my top 5, how I would rank them. They got a really tough schedule. I don't see how they do any better than 10-2. I think they lose at least 2 of Texas, Oregon, Ohio State. I do think they get better as the season goes on, but just I don't see them being as good as they were last year. USC, plus 1,600. I'm really not a believer in USC, and you'll see that in my prediction. I have no questions about the offense. Miller Moss, Zachariah Branch, they're going to be studs. But the defense didn't get any better. The staff did. The players didn't. This isn't the Pac-12. This isn't the Big 12. Lincoln Riley can't get away with having a bad defense like he has. Is he the right guy at USC? I think we've got to start asking the question. I think he is. I think maybe eventually he will get better, but so far the defense has not improved. We'll see what that new staff can do. If they do really good, I think they can go 10-2 this year. Worst case, they're really bad again. Miller Moss gets hurt. 5-7. They're not very good, and like I said, I'm not a believer in them. I think they go 6-6. They make a bowl, I guess, but that's not really what you're aiming for at USC. Their key games, they have to travel to Ann Arbor, but they are home against Penn State and Notre Dame. I really don't believe in this USC team. I don't think the defense is very good. I think they could be. I don't think they're going to be very good. Moving on to probably my sleeper in the Big Ten, Nebraska, plus 4,000. They're not going to top any headlines other than, they got the 5-star quarterback, Dylan Raiola. They're not very high in preseason odds, but they could win the conference. I love what Matt Rule is building in Lincoln. They got a manageable schedule. I think they're going to be favored in almost every game that they play. How good will the offense play? They need to limit the turnovers from last year. That's what killed them. That's what the only thing that stopped them from being a pretty decent team last year were the turnovers. Best case scenario, I think they go 11-1. I don't see them going into Columbus and winning that game, but I think they could win every other game. They could. I'm not saying they're the better team. They do have to go to USC. They do have to play Wisconsin, but I think they could win both those games. Nebraska could be a playoff contender. My prediction for them is 9-3. I think they're somewhat in the middle, but they're going to be pretty good. A lot of excitement comes back to Lincoln, Nebraska this year. For the championship, I'm going with what everyone else is picking. Ohio State versus Oregon, a rematch of the October 12th game. That day is my homecoming, by the way. Can you believe that? October 12th, it's like top 5 day all year for weddings. Yeah, people don't think about homecomings. That makes me so mad. I probably won't even go to homecoming just so that I can stay home and watch these games. I'm a senior. I've been to homecoming. I don't need to go to that. Last year I went for like 15 minutes and left. It's homecoming. The game the night before though, we'll be there and we'll be loud. The dance, no thank you. But October 12th, try not to make plans. Definitely don't go to a homecoming. Go to a wedding, I guess, if you have to. Anyways, the two most talented teams in the Big Ten will match up again in the Big Ten Championship. What more can you say? It's the two most talented teams. This game is so fascinating to me. Most games these days are won by who has the better quarterback. And maybe that's still true in this game, and it's whoever can get the ball to their weapons' hands better, but largely, this game will be won by what wide receivers and running backs can do against really, really good defenses. I think Oregon wins it in a thriller. I don't think Ohio State has an offensive line to win a close physical game against Oregon. The Ducks will have a top 2 seed in the playoff. Moving on to the SEC. First team up, Georgia. They're the favorite to win the SEC championship for what? Oh, no, they didn't win it last year, so there is no win streak. Anyways, preseason favorite to win their third national championship in the past 4 years. Bulldogs are on a historic run. They return a large part of their offense in Carson Beck, Dominic Lovelet, and add one of the top transfers in Trevor Etienne at running back. The only questions I have is, can they replace their D-line? And the question even casual fans are asking, is there a culture problem at Georgia? Obviously, there's street racing issues. Rod Thomas, that whole thing happened with him. Does that have an impact on the field? So far, no. I think that's been a problem for a couple years now and hasn't really affected them on the field other than the SEC championship, but that could be an Alabama problem, not a culture problem. Best case scenario, they're the best team in the country, 12-0, win every single game. Worst case, I think they'd go 8-4. They play a very, very tough schedule. Their key games that I have on here, my top 3 games that they play, at Ole Miss, at Texas, at Bama. 3 away top 10 games. I wouldn't pick anyone. I wouldn't pick anyone ever to go undefeated against them. Impossible. My prediction for them, they go 10-2. Kind of a step back, not quite to Georgia's standards. But, I was listening to Josh Pate a week or so ago, and everyone's piling on, they got culture problems, street racing, blah, blah, blah. But then those same people are the ones that get mad if you pick them to win an SEC championship, right? Or if you don't pick them. So they're saying, they have all these culture problems, but they also think that they're going to win the SEC championship, win every game they play. It's got to have an effect on the field. I think it does this year. I think Texas, Bama, 2 very good teams. Even Ole Miss is a very good team. There's no way they win every single one of those games. Moving on to the second biggest favorite, Texas, another top 5 team in the country. Texas is back. I'm going to say it. They're back. The reigning Big 12 champs are returning so much, yet so little. The wide receivers lost a ton. So did their D-line. How good can Jonte Cook? Isaiah Bond. Jonte Cook was a very high 5-star. He has a ton of potential. How much does he play this year? Does he have a big impact? Isaiah Bond, obviously you guys know him for that play at Auburn last year whenever he was still in Alabama. Transfers to Texas. They are a top 5 team in the country. They could win a national championship. Best case, they go 12-0. Worst case, they go 8-4. Prediction, I think they go 11-1. They go to Michigan, which I think they're going to win in Ann Arbor. They play at home versus Georgia, which I think they're going to win. I think their loss is Texas A&M. I love what they're building over there. I really like the new head coach. I think he's going to be really good. I think that's a statement win over Texas at home over the Longhorns for the first time. That's another rivalry that I haven't experienced in my life. You know what I mean? Like, I started watching college football probably around 2016, 2017. I just haven't experienced that like you guys have. But that is something I'm very much looking forward to. Now, the third biggest favorite is Ole Miss. They're bringing back a very good roster and a really good quarterback in Jackson Dart. Ulysses Bennett will be a very, very solid Quinshon Judkins replacement. I think he could be just as good, if not even better. Maybe a little bit worse, but he could be a lot better. Walter Nolan is going to destroy ACC offensive lines just like he has the past couple of years. This is Lane Kiffin's best team in Oxford. Best team he's had, by far. I think he should have expectations of 10 wins, no lower. Anything lower than that is a failure. Best case, I think they could go 12-0. They have an easier schedule than a couple of the teams in the SEC. Still pretty difficult, but not the worst. The worst case, they go 8-4. I think maybe Jackson Dart doesn't develop as much. Maybe they can't replace Quinshon Judkins. The wide receivers aren't as good. Walter Nolan gets a lot of pressures, but maybe doesn't get a lot of sacks, doesn't force a lot of interceptions or fumbles. They have to go to LSU. I think that game, you're going to learn just how good this Ole Miss team. If they can compete with LSU, or maybe even go to Death Valley and win, you're going to see just how good this Ole Miss team is. They play at home against Oklahoma and at home against Georgia. I think they probably take at least one of those two, probably against Oklahoma. But I do think they take at least one. They're going to be really good, fighting for a college football playoff. Alabama, plus 950 to win the conference. Is there a drop-off after Nick Saban? They didn't let out a ton of transfers. They let out Isaiah Bond, Caleb Downs. Not going to downplay how big of a loss those two are, but didn't let out very many other people. Caleb DeBoer, he just wins, man. He just wins. Doesn't matter if it's D2. Doesn't matter if it's at Sioux Falls. Doesn't matter if it's at Fresno State. Doesn't matter if it's at Washington. He just wins. The amount of times that he has taken the team with the less amount of talent than the team across from them and won is absurd. He's done it every single place he's been. How much does an impact does true freshman Ryan Williams have? He was the first 5-star big recruit of Caleb DeBoer's career at Alabama. He was right after Nick Saban left. He decommitted. Everyone was thinking, is there a huge drop-off now in recruiting? Caleb DeBoer's never had the resources or a really high class to prove, there isn't going to be a drop-off. But right after Nick Saban left, Ryan Williams recommitted to the Crimson Tide. Best case scenario, they're the best team in the conference. They go 12-0. Worst case, again, 8-4, just like all the other teams. They're going to be good. They could be really good. They could be mediocre. I think they go 10-2. Their key games are home versus Georgia, at Tennessee, and home versus Missouri. That Tennessee game. Ooh, the third Saturday of October. Man, that's another rivalry that I actually have experienced. The only one that was really big was, I think it was 2022. Tennessee in Neyland Stadium takes down Alabama. Ooh, man, that was fun to watch. There's something about Tennessee. I was thinking about this the other night. There's something about them. I always cheer for them. I don't know if it's a stadium. I really love Neyland Stadium. I don't know what about it I really like, but I really love Tennessee. We'll talk about them after we talk about LSU, who is plus 1,000 to win the conference. Garrett Nussmeier has big shoes to fill after Jaden Daniels leaves. Obviously, wins the Heisman. Pretty tough to replace. How good is the new defensive coordinator, Blake Baker, coming from Mizzou? He had a really good season last year. Took Mizzou, they won 11 games, beat Ohio State. They're a really good football team last year. How good can he be at LSU? Is it enough to improve the defense? The defense was atrocious. You go, 8-4, I think it was, last year with, maybe it was like 9-4, with the Heisman winner. You have the Heisman winner, and you don't even make the playoffs, don't even come close to the conference championship. That should tell you how bad that defense was. Their key games, they're home against Alabama, home against Ole Miss, and their neutral site game in Las Vegas against USC to open the season. Going to be a tone setter for both programs to see how good they will be this year. Alabama and Ole Miss, two huge games. Very much looking forward to those. Tennessee plus 1100. I'm just gonna call him Nico. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I'm just gonna call him Nico. He could take Tennessee to places they've never been. He's only a sophomore, so he doesn't need to be there all the way yet. But he's got the offense. He's got the weapons to be total difference makers in the SEC. How good is their defense? How well can they complement that high flying offense? Best case scenario, I think they go 11-1. Worst case scenario, they go 8-4. Prediction, I think they go 11-1. I think they hit their best case. They maximize their potential. I think they're a really good football team this year. I think they might make the playoffs this year. Man, Josh Heupel, he's building something over there in Knoxville. I fully believe in it. Missouri, this is my team in the SEC. Okay, I'm from Missouri, right on the border between Mizzou and Kansas, but I've always leaned towards Mizzou. They're plus 1500. I feel like I'm the only one that wholeheartedly believes in Mizzou. I swear, people keep calling them overrated all the time. Am I the only one who watched Luther Burden play football last year? The question is how good they will be on defense. They lost their defense coordinator to LSU, like we just talked about. A few high round picks of the draft. Personally, I think they have the talent to replace it. Also, they have a very easy schedule relative to the SEC. Their best case, I think they could go 12-0, just because of how easy their schedule is. Worst case, they go 8-4. A few things don't work out. The defense isn't as good. I think they go 11-1. I think they lose to Bama, but Texas A&M, they play at Texas A&M. That will be a tough game, and they play at home versus Oklahoma. I'm going to try to go to that game. Not quite sure. I haven't talked to my parents. I am still in high school. Got to talk to my parents. Got to maybe get a few friends on board. They got to talk to their parents. Whole thing. But I think I'm going to try and go to that game. We will see. We'll get to that at a later point. The championship in the SEC, Texas versus Mizzou. Yes, you heard that right. I think Texas and Mizzou, no Georgia, no Bama, no Ole Miss. Man, remember whenever this game happened all the time? I don't, because I was too young, but it was once a reality. I think Mizzou gets here off an easy schedule and shocks a lot of people, but I think Texas wins this game pretty easily over Mizzou. I think Mizzou probably wins a lot of close games to get to this spot, to get into Atlanta. Because of that, I think Texas wins it fairly comfortable in their first year in the SEC. So, for the playoffs, yeah, that's right. We're not just doing conference predictions. We're talking about the playoffs. I'm going to announce my championship pick for the 2024 season. The playoffs, in order. The 1 seed, Texas. 2, Oregon. 3, Miami. 4, K-State. All getting byes, all winning their conference. Number 5, Ohio State. Number 6, Mizzou. 7, Tennessee makes the playoff. 8, Utah. The Big 12 gets 2 teams in there. 9, Ole Miss. 10, Penn State sneaks in there. 11, Georgia gets the last at-large bid. 12, Liberty. They get the last automatic bid. They go 12-0, win every game. They don't play a very good schedule. I'm not even going to talk about them. They're not going to win in the playoffs anyways, but I do think they go 12-0, so they get that automatic bid. For the quarterfinals, I think it's Ohio State versus K-State, Georgia versus Miami, Tennessee versus Oregon, Ole Miss versus Texas. Ohio State versus K-State. What can I really say here? I mean, yes, K-State has the better quarterback, but Ohio State has the better rest of the team. Every single position other than quarterback. They beat them fairly handedly. Georgia versus Miami. I know I believed in Miami, but Georgia's Georgia, man. They're the best team in the country. As of before the season, they're the best team. I think they beat Miami, and I'm not sure. I'm curious who would be favored in a scenario where a 2-loss Georgia versus an undefeated Miami at a neutral site. I'm curious what the line would be on that game. My third quarterfinal game, you got Tennessee versus Oregon. Another huge game. Tennessee, you got Nico in his first year. Oregon, they're going to be really, really good. Dylan Gabriel takes them to the Big Ten Championship to win it, gets that bye. Of course, we're talking about the quarterfinals, so the teams that I haven't talked about and that I won't talk about already got eliminated. The Mizzous, the Penn States, the Liberties, the Utahs of the world. They didn't win those games. So we're just going to talk about the quarterfinals. Oregon's going to be really good. Tennessee's going to be really good. I think Oregon takes it. I think it's going to be an absolute thriller of a game. High-flying offenses all over the place. Big plays all over the place. But I think Oregon takes it in that scenario. For my fourth and final quarterfinal, Ole Miss versus Texas. Man, this would be an awesome game in 1953. But here we are in 2024. I guess 2025, possibly. I'm not sure when this game will happen. But Ole Miss versus Texas. Texas, they're just a top 5 team, man. They're one of the best teams in the country. I think they pull away from Ole Miss and prove that they belong. Semifinals. Ohio State versus Texas. Oregon versus Georgia. Ohio State versus Texas. Man, Quinn Ewers. He's going to be the storyline. Just Quinn Ewers. That's the only thing you're going to hear about before that game. Trying to beat his old team. Going to be really interesting. I think this game might be the game of the year. I also think Oregon and Georgia could be. I think any of these games could be game of the year. And I think everyone's going to watch it. And everyone's going to love it. And everyone's going to be supporting. Yay, expanded playoff. Woo! And everyone's going to love it. Until they look at that and realize, who are the top 4 teams in the preseason? Ohio State, Texas, Oregon, and Georgia. Is this what you guys want? The top 4 preseason teams. I'll get to that in a second. The championship, I think Georgia wins it versus Oregon in a heartbreaker for Dan Lanning. He just can't beat his old team. Texas and Ohio State, I think Texas takes it. I think they just have the better offensive line, better defensive line. I think they replace what they lost. I think they win it in a very physical game. Oregon just can't out-physical Georgia. I think these 2 games are going to be really physical games if they happen. For the championship, Georgia versus Texas. Who would have thought? Rematch of what happened in the regular season. I think Georgia takes it. I think at 10-2, I guess in this case, 14-2, Georgia team wins the national championship. From the 11 seed, they were the last at-large team in my standings. I think they win the national championship. Their 3rd in 4 years. Okay, let's talk about this. Rant time. This is what people wanted. Who are the preseason top 4? Again, Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, and Texas. Who finished in the Final 4 in my predictions? The exact same teams. This is the problem with the 12-team playoff. I've talked to people who complain, it's the same 4 teams every year. Well, congrats. Now you gave 2-loss Georgia a shot at the national championship. How do you think that's going to go? But that's what you wanted, right? God, please give us a 6 or 8-team playoff. This 12-team playoff is going to give teams who don't necessarily deserve it shots at a national championship. And Georgia, I think they're the best team in the country. I think, obviously, I picked them to win a national championship. But I also picked them to win 2 games, or to lose 2 games in the regular season. I'm not happy about this. I'm not glad that I picked Georgia to win the national championship. But I also picked with my brain and not my heart. And I think that they will. The issue with the 12-team playoff is that, yeah, it was the same 4 teams every year. But now it's going to be the same 4 teams again every year. You're going to tell me that, Liberty has a shot? No, they don't. Utah, K-State, Miami even, Mizzou. You really think that they have shots to win a national championship? No, but they got into the playoffs. That's not a good thing. But to end this on a happy note, we are back in the Scoring from the 50 podcast. I hope I can get this uploaded pretty soon. But I do love you guys. I appreciate you guys so much for listening to this and waiting a whole year. I know there was a tiny little episode for my ELA class back in the spring, but I'm so glad you guys could wait a whole year for me to bring this back. I'm looking forward to a great season in 2024. I cannot wait to talk to you guys again next week.